Hi, welcome to Observations. I'm host John Walsh, publisher of the Palm Coast and Ormond Beach Observer community newspapers. Observations is a collection of podcasts and videos of conversations with neighbors, community partners, elected officials, and friends about local issues that are taking place in many communities.
Welcome to Observations. I'm Brian McMillan, executive editor of the Palm Coast Observer, and I have with me a very special guest, Nick Klufas.
Thank you very much for having me on today.
Palm Coast City Council member Nick Klufas. I have to say a very special guest because every guest is very special on Observations. Thanks for joining us on Facebook Live, also on YouTube Live. We have several questions, so we'll get right into it. And first, we weren't expecting this when we first talked about joining me on the show today, but Melissa Holland, for those who haven't heard, Melissa Holland has resigned as mayor after one and a little bit of a term. So my first question to you is, I should explain again that she resigned last night due to her daughter's poor health. And so I was wondering if you could just start out with that, Nick, and just say, what do you think her legacy is as mayor?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I would just like to say that I hope the absolute best outcome for both Melissa Holland and her daughter Tori. They've been through so much together, and I've seen it throughout our tenure on council together. Tori deserves to have the best care possible, and if this is what Melissa needs to do to be able to provide that, I fully support it. Her legacy in Palm Coast is one that really defines the trajectory of Palm Coast. We've had so many great accomplishments over the last almost 5 years now that finally I'm seeing them come to fruition. An example is the Holland Park splash pads. These are the type of legacy projects that they leave a lasting impression on Palm Coast, and they're going to impact future generations. I would say, our mayor's legacy will really be defined by the incredible job we've done embracing the UNF MedNext project and bringing in medical campuses to Palm Coast. I think that is going to be how we lever the tremendous student that is produced in the Flagler County school system. We keep them in Palm Coast, we provide them with a high-paying job locally, and we're going to be able to retain the #1 export from Flagler County, which at one point was our students.
Very good. So I feel like in years of covering the city council that you often voted in similar ways to Melissa Holland. Do you feel like your kind of vision for the city aligns well with what she seemed to be, promoting over the years?
I do think we shared similar vision in the fact that we understand the value of Palm Coast amenities and that people choose Palm Coast because the quality of life here is so high. And the utilization of our taxpayer dollars and being a responsible steward to our taxpayer dollar is something that I take very seriously. And over the years, we have aligned on projects that we agree will beautify Palm Coast. It was nice having a like-minded ally who very objective. She was never would shy away from any conversation that we would have, and we didn't always agree, but historically, we would solve things in workshops, and there were less fractured votes, 3-2 votes. These things would be hammered out in workshops. So I wouldn't say we always necessarily were in tandem, but we were always able to come to a common ground and involve the rest of the council, and that is really how you get the best output from a council. When you can have open discussions, have input from all the council members on why they are for or against whatever resolution or ordinance is in front of us, and try to come to a solution before the actual business meeting. And then we just have a fractured 3-2 vote, and there's not an opportunity to actually, reconcile or come to a means that's applicable to everyone. And that's a sad turn that our council has taken as of late. But I'm hopeful that we can restore that.
So there's going to be a special election to replace Melissa Holland as mayor. So are you going to run?
I am not. No, my goal is to move on to the county commission in 2024. I did think about running for mayor. I would have to vacate my seat now. I don't feel it's exactly the most appropriate time to run for mayor. And to be honest, the environment for an election right now, specifically with city council and what has happened most recently, it's just a there's a lot of turmoil in the air, and I fear that I would regret not retaining my seat and ensuring that I know I can vote my conscience and the vision that I have for Palm Coast and continue to have influence until I'm ready to take that next step.
Very good. So next question is about this sort of tone at City Council. You know, we had a pretty raucous meeting a few weeks ago. Someone charges the dais. And since then, it hasn't really, I mean, it's better than that. It's not like, you know, physical threats or anything, but there's been a lot of tension. It's gotten personal. There's been insults. So where do we go from here? I mean, there's going to be a new member on the city council in some way as a mayor. But how do you contribute to being a solution? Does it even matter that it's really a civil situation up there?
It's interesting. A lot of the unrest from the crowd, I think a lot of these participants the majority of them I had never seen at a city council meeting before. And the rules and procedures are not, you know, something that we take lightly. So approaching the dais was just complete nonsense. But I think how we shift the rhetoric and the tone to a more positive outlook is, number one, we've done a tremendous job at the city overhauling our communications and marketing team. We do a great job getting the positive word out, especially via social media. But if we can combat the negative rhetoric, which oftentimes is quote unquote fake news, and it just leads to more questions than actual actionable items. And I say that because—
What kind of rhetoric are you talking about?
So things, for instance, $34 million to water clay tennis courts, and things like that get put out there, also with the context of whomever is saying these things, saying, I'm not sure if these numbers are real.
You're talking about Alan Lowe. He brought that up specifically
Yeah.
at the last meeting and said that sort of defended his decision to bring those numbers out because there was the preface that these might not be correct. So
Yeah.
you feel like that's a bad
Well,
policy.
my question is, do you feel a responsibility before you put these numbers and figures out to the public that you've done research to back to at least the first degree of certainty that what you're saying is true? Otherwise, you're almost spreading rumors that you are admitting you're not exactly sure are true. And that's a very serious acquisition, especially with today's age where social media catches on fire. People just repost things without actually fact checking. The city's done a great job specifically with the Racket Center, laying out all the costs and communicating the vision from 2016 and before that this has been on our strategic action plan. The tone around the Regional Racket Center was basically that we just came to a decision that we're going to have phase one improvements. But this has been something that's been in the works for years. It has been part of our strategic action plan, and that doesn't exactly get relayed by certain members of our councils, specifically the individuals who I don't necessarily align myself with. In this case, it was Ed Danko, who, he's relaying these things, but with a little bit of shadow or shade, because the allure that this is just something new that he was unaware of. It just creates a weird dynamic on the council, and we work best when we're unified.
But when there is a new member that comes on, and somebody may say, well, is that really the best use of those dollars? There's $5.5 million being spent on one project, the tennis center. Can you sympathize with the idea that person might say, well, why is this number one priority? And are we sure that it still is the number one priority? If it was in 2004, 2016, what's wrong with looking at the rest of them and making sure that it's number one?
Absolutely. And I
But you voted against delaying to look at the list and prioritize.
Well, that list isn't something new, and this also isn't something that we just decided that we were going to be moving forward with. I would say I sympathize with the headline that we're spending $5.5 million on a regional racket center, but there's a big asterisk at the end of that $5.5 million. These are impact fees,
right.
Parks and Recreation impact fees that have to specifically be spent on new construction and add to the Parks and Rec capacity in the area for which we collected those funds. Also the CRA dollars. I believe it's $600,000 of general fund tax money. So a very small portion is actually being funded by ad valorem taxes. So these are dollars that we can't spend on swales. We can't spend them on sidewalks. We can't spend them on, hiring more deputies for our city streets. So the $5.5 million headline, I do sympathize with that. And I catch, both sides. And I wish that I could make the headline 240 characters long, but I can't. There is.
If only it could be as long as a tweet.
Right, I hear you.
As in depth as a tweet.
Correct.
So we're getting a racket center.
Yes.
Do we also need a skate park?
There has been talk about a skate park, mostly by residents. As of late, probably within the last few months, it's been brought up. Do we need a skate park? I think a skate facility is something, the actual running cost of a skate park isn't that much, so it's a one-time build and use. Also in Wadsworth Park, I've seen that park packed at this skate park. So I think that's something that is definitely an amenity that a growing city would have. I think the air around skateboarders has kind of calmed since, the 90s and 2000s and 2010s.
Skateboarding is not a crime.
Yes, exactly. Tony Hawk is now, a common household name.
Yeah.
So I think there is definitely room for that type of amenity. And I love the fact that cool amenities like that, a skate park, is something that really draws, people to an area. If you have a tremendous skate park, it can do a lot of things.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so median household income in Palm Coast is $53,000.
Sure.
They say you shouldn't spend more than about 30% on your housing. So that comes to $1,400 or so per month. So my question is, do we have a problem?
Do we have a problem? I don't necessarily think we have a problem because we're market driven. And I think we see the market reacting in the way that the market finds in accordance with free market. I think the diversity of our housing index isn't ample enough to be able to supply everyone who works in Palm Coast a place to live. $1,400, if you're looking at a single person without children living in, a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom.
You can do fine. There's a lot of options for that in Palm Coast, actually. But we're talking the median household income.
Yep.
So that means half are not making that.
Yeah.
And a lot of those that are younger, or that are less than that, are probably not, you can't do 1 bedroom. Even 2 bedrooms might not really be feasible because a lot of those are probably families. So, really what I'm asking about is affordable housing.
Sure.
Every time new housing gets proposed, recently there's 450 homes that are
K-section.
That are going to happen in the K-section. And there was within several hours, there were about 100 comments on that Facebook post saying, people basically tearing their hair out we don't want to, we got to move.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people moving here.
Yep.
But yet, there's that sentiment, and then also the sentiment of we also can't afford it because we're making less than the 53, so we can't afford an apartment. So does government need to? I'm not saying it should. I'm asking you. Does government need to play a role to try to do something about the housing market to make it more affordable somehow?
Sure, I think that'd be reasonable in an area where we didn't have organic expansion opportunities for the market voids to be filled. If we were in a city where there's limited amount of residential space, that's when you start to talk about things like rent control and making it livable for.
Are you talking about areas where new land that could be developed? Okay.
Is limited? Yes, in Palm Coast it's not.
It's not limited here.
Correct. Yeah. So we're seeing these adjustments in the market, specifically the 400 homes in the K section. That previously was 244 homes, I believe, but it was also a downzoning from industrial to standard family residential 1 zoning. So we're definitely seeing the change in reaction to where the market is driving demand. And I think we're seeing that at a rate currently that would deem it unnecessary to have government subsidies in our area. But I could see that being applicable to higher density areas where there's just not enough room for the market to respond accordingly.
Very good. Next question. Can you sympathize with that first group that I mentioned of that they want the city to stop growing so fast?
Sure.
Because I feel like I drive up and down US 1 often. I live in the Northwest, Matanzas Woods, and I see those cows, the pasture. I see the sunrise over those cows, and it's like I don't want houses to be built there.
Yeah.
But yet, so what do you say to those people who don't really want the growth?
I think my message to the people who don't want the growth is, number one, we all moved here from somewhere else. It's very rare to find people who originated in Palm Coast, but they do exist. And I would also say more critical to the whole feel of Palm Coast is keeping the level of services and quality of life just as high for every new resident that moves here. And we sustain that level of service to make it feel like Palm Coast. Palm Coast is a very unique place with the high quality of life and the low municipal tax rate that we have. We do a great job spending our tax dollars to give us the quality of life we have. As long as we can sustain that and keep our quality of life high, then these people, it's more rhetoric than anything, but honestly, if we were to ask those people, well, what's the solution? They would say a moratorium on growth. So do we lock down the city and say, hey, we found Palm Coast. I bet you wish you did too. That's an opinion that generally is not popular, but I do sympathize specifically with people who have unknowingly bought into an area where there's already the future land use map is already pre-approved for, you know, multifamily living or light commercial. And then at the time of the development occurring, they're like, oh my goodness, I have a commercial one behind my house. This is terrible, but it's been that way for the last 15 years. So,
and someone bought that land knowing they were going to develop it. So it's a really difficult situation.
And then they put cows on it for the tax purposes.
Love the cows.
I'm telling you, sunrises.
Good tax break.
Yes.
So when MedNex was first announced, MedNexus,
yes,
we kept calling it MedNex.
Yep. And
then all of a sudden UNF is calling it MedNexus. So I'm really upset about that. We had to change our naming for it. But when it was first announced, they unveiled these magnificent renderings of this huge building, and you're like, that's going to go right here by Central Park. Yep. And now it seems that maybe they're leasing in the city center building and maybe don't really have any plans right away to build anything anytime soon. So I'm wondering, is the sheen of that is the excitement kind of like maybe dampened about MedNexus, or are you still just as high about it as before?
Oh, I'm still just as high about it as before. The renderings for the campus, you know, are tremendous. They are.
Is it a sales job? Or did something happen?
Is it a sales job? Is it a sales job that they have, you know, committed $1 million to scholarships for students, and that they've, I think that on the books they have 50 students and 70 students for this upcoming semester, respectively, the 2 medical programs. These are realities. Whether or not the actual structural building has been started to build yet, a sale job that I think is going to come to fruition, but they are starting their operations immediately. So. I don't necessarily think it's a sales job. I think it's a vision into the future on what could be. And if we look at other examples near us, like Winter Park is a perfect example of how I see town center being developed. And that's exciting to me.
Yeah, very good. There's definitely, I mean, when I moved here, there was no movie theater. And now, by comparison, town center is kind of hopping.
It is.
So it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure in the next 5 years or so, it'll be night and day kind of a difference.
It's very walkable, and also the higher density housing that we need. Town center is specifically built for that. The individuals who don't want it in their backyard, I fully understand that. So as a council and as a city, we promote growth inside of town center. That's a win for everyone.
I have 2 more questions for you. One is, are we smart?
Are we smart as a city?
That was kind of a purposely vague, question.
Gotcha.
That's kind of an interviewing trick that I've learned over
Old
the years.
cop trick.
No, everybody talks about a smart city. Yep. Palm Coast, you're a technology guru. Yep. So is Palm Coast a smart city? Are we smart enough as a city as far as technology is concerned? What can we see? Tell us the future.
The future, honestly, Palm Coast is set up just as well, if not better, than any emerging city across the country with a municipal fiber broadband utility. And what I say, or what I mean by that, is we have our facilities, Palm Coast FiberNet. So we have 50 miles of fiber around the city, delivers high-speed internet access to all the city facilities and also a few commercial clients. What we need to do is build off of that to offer it to any commercial business that's on net, meaning that basically just plug and play. And then we need to focus on using that as a smart incentive because the city can provide an exponential multiplier on the dollar that we're delivering to our customers. So for instance, Joya Sales, when they built their second building a few years ago, we gave 2 years of internet service to them, and it cost the city minimal amount of money to horizontal bore across their parking lot, a few $1,000s, saved them $144,000 on their data fees. So something that cost us a few $1,000s would offset $144,000 of expense for a business that wants to come to Palm Coast. It is a great economic incentive because we're not giving them cold hard cash. We're giving them the quality bandwidth that they need to survive. Mm-hmm. And if you can operate anywhere, which being in the technology industry, if I have a laptop and quality internet connection, I'm bringing my job with me. So if we're having growth with the right individuals in mind, they're bringing jobs with them. A lot of people are working remotely, and that's what COVID has proven to a lot of people, is that you can do your job remotely.
The tech remote boom is probably the revolution. Maybe,
exactly
is still happening.
Yeah.
I lied a minute ago because I said I had 2 questions. I still have 2 questions because I'm looking at that newspaper there, and I want to ask you that question that is posed in the headline: is our sign code too restrictive? Yeah. This was on the front page, several weeks ago. But where do you stand on this kind of debate about, either signs on the sides of trucks in driveways or signs for businesses? Do you feel like it needs to be softened somehow?
Well, I think gauging the temperature of our community and the residents is really important with critical issues like this. These are the type of ordinances that make Palm Coast Palm Coast. Yeah. You're not allowed to have your boat in your front yard. You can't have broken down vehicles, et cetera, that differentiate us from neighboring communities.
Can we say you can have a pretty boat but not an ugly boat?
You can, and that's where I'm at. And I think that's where a lot of people are at. They don't mind. So, perfect example, I have a friend who owns a local air conditioning business. He has a work van, $65,000 plus all the equipment in it. These are top of the line work vehicles, and they're, I don't want to say they're beautiful because they're not a Lamborghini, but they are a great looking work vehicle, and I would be proud to have that in my driveway. That's awesome. Now, an industrial, mason or cement truck that's broken down, just the nature of the beast. Can you have an ordinance that says no ugly trucks? And you can. And that's part of the sign code ordinance as well. If you have to read the words that are on the sign to make an ordinance apply to a sign or not, you can't do that because of freedom of speech. So we basically have to be all or nothing. We can't say we'll allow open house signs in our medians between 12 and 9. If you're allowed to have a open house sign, you're allowed to put whatever you want on the sign and put it in that median. And there's a lot of extremes that your mind can wander on what would happen.
So in other words, you feel like this is what makes Palm Coast, and leave it alone.
Yeah.
Is that what you feel about it?
So leave it alone to an extent. Where we're at right now is I'm hoping that our city attorney can come back with verbiage and other ordinances that are more liberating to vehicles that are not in disrepair. I'd like to explore those avenues. I think there are legitimate reasons that, especially if you're going on emergency calls, like plumbers and things like that, if they have to park their truck offsite, oftentimes those middle of the night calls, it's a hassle. Mm-hmm. We also allow the sheriff's office to take home their vehicles. So I want to make sure that we have all of these things taken care of. But people who have moved to Palm Coast knew that level of exceptional living was what they were moving to Palm Coast for. The last thing that I would want to do is unravel something that people moved here because they adored.
I wonder sometimes how much people knew what they were getting into, though.
Sure.
I mean, when you move into an HOA and I'm paying this extra money and therefore I have to get my house color approved. Mm-hmm. I don't think typically people think that when they move to a normal city, not in an HOA. So I wonder about the education level on what they're getting into. It's similar, I think, to when people show up at a city council meeting and they might start talking about something that's on the agenda, but later, and they have to be told, you can't do that. They probably don't know either. So I feel like sometimes it's kind of like, how do you make sure people feel included even though they're new?
Absolutely.
It's a hard balance to strike because you can't spend the whole time reviewing all of Robert's rules. We'll now spend an hour reading Robert's rules to everybody to make sure we're good.
At the beginning of every meeting.
That would be not as fun. Okay, last question.
Sure.
Probably.
Fair.
What leadership principles guide you in your role in city council and other kind of leadership roles? Or what have you learned about being a leader since you've been elected?
So much. I have learned so much from so many great individuals that I've had the privilege of serving with. Mayor Melissa Holland, former Mayor John Netz, rest in peace. He was so many John Nett-isms do I have applied to my life. Those who are the first to complain often don't make change, and if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. The difference between bacon and fat is who cuts it, these type of things. But as far as leadership goes, you don't ask people to exert more effort than they have seen you exert yourself. Mm-hmm. You put yourself in the position of those that you're trying to lead. Empathetic behavior is so critical to have someone on your team. and also ensuring that those individuals who are working hard and want to be part of the team are recognized. And you always try to promote from within and ensure that your employees are appreciated. I think the best thing that we can do as a city is have happy city employees. There's so many touch points that residents come to me, and often I don't give specific names to city management or anything, but just instances of, hey, the water utility came to my house to fix my PEP tank. Best interaction I've had with the city. That is the difference between whether that person likes the city and does not. Mm-hmm. And we put such an emphasis on ensuring that the persona and the happiness level of employees is high, and that's reality because we try to do right by our employees. And if you can make sure that those who are fighting for you are happy and believe in the mission, I think that's one of the most important things as leadership is having buy-in from the bottom to the top.
Mr. Klufas, thank you for joining me and all of our viewers on Observations. I'll also be revisiting this for a print version in the newspaper coming up, so you can go and reread and make sure I edited it correctly, lightly edited transcript. If you enjoyed the content of this video, click the subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you can see all the upcoming YouTube videos from the Palm Coast Observer. And thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.
Ha ha ha.